We should be streaming.
All right. Should we clap it in?
Sure.
Okay.
Woo!
What's up, guys? It's On Fire Tonight with Josh and Tressa. We are here today to talk about Max Headroom, Season 2, Episode 2. The episode is called Deities. This is your one and only warning. We are about to spoil it all. You've had 40 years, so the time has come. We are joined by special Max Headroom correspondent, Memo Salazar. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only.
Thank you for once again inviting me to this wonderful discussion on one of the seminal works of 80s pop culture. It's exciting.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, and apologies that Season 2 seems to be
boring as hell.
Like, what the fuck did I just watch?
It took me 2 days and I still hated it.
Now I get why they canceled the show.
It's always hard, that second season of like trying to continue what was the original creative spark and at the same time making the gods of the network happy, right? Because I'm sure there's all these like pressures and notes of like, we need sexier Max Headroom or whatever.
Right. Or like, we need to be cutting edge social satire.
Right.
Possibly. I mean,
I'd rather have that. I don't want to see Edison Carter fucking anyone ever. Gross.
Well, it's such an interesting, like, it's so weird that I guess it's coming out in the second series that like there's all this clear pressure for like needing a sexy leading man, right? As like, oh, we need it's TV and whatever. And he's by nature this sort of nerdy, intellectual, detached type, which is like the opposite of your George Clooney's or whatever the network would want. So it's weird that they even like greenlit from that point of view, that they even said, yeah, let's go. I guess it was because it was done in England first, and so they already had this guy in character. They're like, let's capitalize on it. But once you try to turn it into like American show, you're like, wait a minute. Something's not fitting here. And so like trying to force his squared peg into the round hole of like sexy Hollywood TV guy, it's getting weirder and weirder.
Yeah, he's got like at his core, he's like a silly character. He's a goofy character and an overly earnest character.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of which is not something I don't know if I would want to hang out with this person in real life.
Oh God, no. Ugh. No, thank you.
We're talking about like Edison Carter?
Edison Carter, but also Max Headroom, you know?
Oh, right. Even worse. No. Right. Edison Carter, he just seems like a prick who's so fucking full of himself. Like he thinks that he has the best shit on earth. No one can top him ever. And you know what? That might be true. I have no idea, but he looks like he sucks. I don't know.
Well, there's also like a real, there's a problem, and I don't think it's just shows being made at this time, but like the idea of a character who is the leader and the characteristics that make him the leader, and it's always a him, are not well defined. They are just, they are the leader because they are the leader. And then they have to act like the leader, and everyone like defers to them because they are the leader. And it becomes a sort of emperor has no clothes type situation where it's like, why is this person the leader? Why is anyone listening to them? Like, why is anyone support? Like when we go to the boardroom and Ben Cheviot is like, Edison Carter is amazing. He backs his hunch and follows it up. Like, that's not journalism.
Right. But yeah, it also doesn't feel like it fits his personality, like you said. You're like,
yeah,
this guy? This is the guy you were just talking about?
Would you consider him a Bill Murray type? Is it an 80s Bill Murray situation? Maybe?
I think that there's something like Bill Murray's character in Ghostbusters was singular, right? Like can you think of another example of a silly goofball who's sort of a fuck up, but he's also clearly the leader that makes sense? Like from any time, like from the past 150 years.
What about the Dream Team with Michael Keaton? That sort of parody. I don't know why that just came to my mind, but like, do you remember that 80s movie? It's sort of like an 80s comedy version of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where like Michael Keaton is like the Jack Nicholson character of this crazy gang. Peter Boyle's in it. So he like takes them out on a field trip and they all go loose, and he's trying to catch all the crazies because they're all like from like the mental home, and he's like the orderly guy who works there. You never saw this movie? I love the movie. It's so ridiculous. But he's kind of like that. Michael Keaton plays this sort of like dopey, kind of charming.
Oh yeah, totally. Like even in Mr. Mom, Michael Keaton was very much that.
Right. I don't think I ever saw that movie, but I now can remember that it existed.
Yeah. I think Peter Boyle believes he's the second coming of Jesus Christ. So he's walking around the city as if he's Jesus, just convinced that he's here to save humanity. He's finally been let out of the crazy home to do his deeds of miraculous savior. And I don't remember the plot very well, other than they're just all loose and he's got to find them all. I'm sure there's like a romantic love story in there somewhere, but anyway.
Well, but yeah, I mean, I think Michael Keaton has he's got a little bit of that special sauce, right? Like,
right. Well, the thing is, like you just said, the thing is what Edison doesn't have. He doesn't have charisma. So, like, Bill Murray gets away with it because, he's a wise ass and but he's like, you like him. He's got this charisma, this sort of outsider charisma, but it's still charming. And this guy doesn't really have a lot of charm.
Yeah, I don't get it. Like Matt Frewer, I'm not sure what's missing. Because, like, as we discussed previously, like, as kids, we thought Max Headroom was fucking cool. And even cooler, as listeners will attest, was Bruce Willis as David Addison in Moonlighting.
Right.
So, somewhere between these two characters played by one guy, there's almost all of that, right? Like, I don't know. I don't know if you agree with me, and please feel free to disagree. But it's like Max Headroom is a total goofball. He is an agent of chaos, but he also just sounds like he's having a stroke at all times. Like the glitchy way that they have him like get talking. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I think they're like, it seemed cool and technological at the time. And now I'm just like, get it out, like spit it out.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's the same. I mean, I think that's kind of it. Like as kids, you're so in love with the gimmick. And obviously in the 80s, it looks so cutting edge and futuristic. That's enough for you when you're like 10 or whatever, you're like, oh my God, this is awesome. Now you see it, you're like looking at character and personality and you're like, wait, there's none of that here. He's not like Han Solo or whatever, Yeah.
Or even like Bugs Bunny.
Bugs Bunny, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bugs Bunny is very much a Bill Murray type.
Absolutely. Like he's or what's the
yeah, like nothing shakes you, right? Like no matter what situation you get thrown in, you just deal with it with like a joke.
Yeah.
Which is such a cool attribute for a person to have.
You're goofy and confident. There you go.
Right. Yeah, he's confident, but like you said, to like an arrogant
degree.
He's
totally arrogant.
You're just a jerk.
Right.
Which
and there
Bill
are certain
Murray
people
too.
who can like, I mean, Bill Murray, but it's like, I think we're all buying into whatever arrogance, if it's arrogance or if it's just like confidence. I like, sometimes it's difficult to know the difference.
Sure.
But you know it when you see it, right? Like,
yeah. Oh, yeah. And I think looking back, watching Ghostbusters as an adult, Bill Murray seems like a fucking cock. But back in the 80s, I was like, this guy's fun as hell. I think it's all in perspective as well.
Well, right. I think that, I mean, you're also touching, so there's sort of the universal charisma factor that I think people through the ages have had and been able to get other people to do things that they want them to do because they've got this charisma. But then also in the 80s, there's this extra 80s value of like what was being pushed by Hollywood and whatever as like the kind of man to be, which is really arrogant and doesn't date well. And you look back now and you're like, wow, they're all just assholes, like sexist assholes, you know? And it's weird. You're right. Like, but I remember even as a kid growing up and like sometimes being aware of that even then of being like, I don't know if this is really the kind of guy I want to become, you know, like, and so, I mean, not Max Headroom wasn't one. I was totally in love with that show or whatever, but like, yeah, there's just certain movies that I know, like, I'm like, I know he's supposed to be cool, but I'm not really liking this guy. So I had some sense that there's something beyond the 80s value system that like would continue on, I guess.
I mean, good for you, because hook, line, and sinker for me, I was like, wow, these guys are cool and funny.
Awesome. Oh yeah, no, I mean, no, don't get me wrong. Like, I think a lot, me too, for a lot of it. But there was sometimes that where I was like, wait, what? Just because like I think Hollywood went too far sometimes and trying to like push you into believing that this guy was awesome. Yeah. But, you know, when they were like materialistic and like completely mean to everybody, and somehow that was like a praiseworthy.
Yeah.
Persona, and you're like, wait, I don't get what's so cool about this guy. But
oh, that's interesting. Like Michael J. Fox on, what was that show where he Alex P. Keaton? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So like his whole character was like a Reagan era like financial douchebag, but he was also a high school student,
right?
Whose parents were hippies, basically.
Whose right. Parents were hippies, and somehow, I mean, Michael J. Fox is just like incredibly charismatic. So you're like, wow, this like greedy asshole teenager seems to really have like it all figured out. Maybe like maybe that's a good formula.
But you're right. Like, but so imagine if Matt played that character, right? If he was Alex P. Keaton and you stuck that actor.
Incel.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? Like that character has no friends.
Right.
That character comes home from school, and if it were like the modern day, like is just on the internet, like shit posting and
yeah.
It's like, take a shower, dude.
Matt Frewer as Alex P. Keaton would just be fucking angry all the time.
Yeah.
Just a miserable person.
But like maybe, but here's the thing, like we all really liked this show when we were kids. And I think that there's something about Matt Frewer that has some kind of special sauce, but like it's not hitting the way it used to. So what was it that we loved, and is it still there?
Well, I mean, was it because we were kids?
I think that's part of it. Like we have a different perspective on things.
Right. We were stupid idiots. I think that it was just he was goofy, and like he had his own, what was it? He marched to a beat of a different drummer, and he wasn't having any of that nerd stuff over there. He was going to do his own shit, and he was going to show everyone that he's great and his ideas were the best. And you know what? Cool. I think that's awesome. And he must be the best guy ever.
I mean, he stands up against like conspiracy stuff. He stands up against like the whatever the powers that be are, in order to tell all the people out there the real truth. And he's got like an action hero quality. Like in the first season, there was a lot of like helicopters zooming in, and he was like,
he rode that goofy ass bike.
Rode that fucking ridiculous bike.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, on paper his character does that, and maybe just now we're like wiser enough to recognize it. The actor doesn't, you know, like match the character that was written Because like I don't believe now, watching it now, that this guy gives a shit about the truth in any way, or that he's fighting for the common man. Like, and actually, this episode sort of does kind of bring that to light in this. Like, I think what's her name, the priestess. They're like kind of
Vanna Smith.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, it was a time when Vanna White was
Smith.
everywhere all the time. Her like old nudes had gotten unearthed by either Playboy or Penthouse, and literally every night on A Current Affair they were like, we gotta have 5 minutes of Vanna White time. I don't know if you guys watched that show in the 80s, but I did.
I remember parodies, like Dr. Demento parodies about Vanna White. Like, that's how big she was. She was getting her own parodies and so on. I do remember that. But yeah, like, so she, she kind of calls him out on, like, she's like, we both kind of do the same thing. Like, sure, I'm like suckering people, but kind of you are too. You're working for the man, So like, yeah, like how much he's like the truth guy, I don't know, but like he doesn't sell me. I don't believe that he has like a heart of gold there who's like passionately fighting for. He's not like an activist,
Right. And then, so like, what exactly happened in this episode? It was not the best one.
No.
Like, he has to do a report on this View Age church, which is like very early sort of, we're going to upload your consciousness, and then we're going to once the technology exists, we're going to like scan you into a clone so that like you can be reborn and your loved ones can have you back again. Edison doesn't initially want to cover this story because he used to date the faith healer lady that's at the head of the church, Vanna. And then Murray takes it on, like, he's like, what's going on with Edison? He doesn't want to cover this story. Is he religious? Like, he starts asking Fiora and poking around. And it's like, is that even the point? Like,
right. What does he care?
Yeah. What? Yeah.
Yeah. It's sort of like they needed us to move us to this part of the plot. And so they just like shoved us there, even though there was no motivation for it. You're just like, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know if this is jumping towards the end of it.
Oh, just go ahead.
Yeah,
like, people have either watched the episode or not. They've had enough time to do so.
Well, I mean, I just love that they're all aware that he's biased for this journalistic story, right? But no one ever goes, well, maybe we should pull him off of this just because of journalistic sort of like integrity. This is just sort of, if someone is got a conflict of interest, the obvious thing nowadays one would think is you have to be pulled off the story, especially when at the beginning of the episode, this is talking about his arrogance, is when they're in that group meeting and there's like other staff reporters. There's that woman who's Asian American who's just standing there, and he's like, oh, this is such a dumb story, even she could do it, even this dumb Asian American woman who clearly isn't as qualified as I am. So
no
it's
offense.
like, right, no offense, right. And then
offense.
Yeah, exactly. So then the whole show, they're like, oh, what are we gonna do? Like, he's clearly biased, and no one's like, oh, maybe we should pull him and give her the story. No, that is not even on the table.
Which is bananas, because season 1 introduced the amazing character of Janie Crane, who's like,
where the fuck did she go?
Like, she's the real muckraker. She like puts herself in harm's way and gets the story.
It's true.
Yeah, she's disappeared.
Too much competition. He had to make arrangements with the top brass to remove her.
Oh, maybe she got sent to the body bank.
Oh, you get good money for the body bank.
Yeah, dead or alive.
It's true.
Such a confusing future.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, watching them talk about this whole like put your consciousness and we'll store it for later, and then like in light of like ChatGPT, and I'm like, oh, well, we're actually getting close to where you could bring up that marketing scam again and convince people like, hey, like for whatever amount of money, we'll create a virtual loved one. You can just talk to them all day long.
That's a good point.
I was like, oh, this is where it's kind of prescient.
Well, also, I don't know that this I don't know that this concept has ever really gone away. I think that as technology progresses, we keep seeing storylines about this kind of thing where like you have a loved one and you can like upload their consciousness and
I mean,
like
we
their
already did
consciousness
this.
goes to a digital heaven.
We did this episode in the first season as well, only it wasn't a church. It was just a rich guy and his mom. Like,
That's right. That's right.
Weren't they trying to like
take her consciousness, put it in a
right.
hot chick or something like that? I don't know. It was
Right.
Right. There was they needed both a perfect body match and like the Max Headroom technology. So it was a little bit more Dr. Frankenstein than this.
But yeah, but that idea certainly. I mean, obviously this isn't the first place that idea existed either, but just watching it on this show, I was like just being like, oh yeah, like of course someone soon is going to actually have this kind of a business for real. They won't need the religious angle. They'll just be like, here, we'll just preserve your dearly departed spouse and you can talk to them for the rest of your life and it's cool. Just,
yeah, except they're only going to say the same sentence over and over.
Well, right, but that's where like now the modern version. So that's what you could do in the 80s, right?
It's right. No, it's really nice now. Yeah. Now you go to Chat GPT and you're like, all right, I had this whole conversation with my loved one that's dead.
Right. Probably. It is funny that like she was like totally okay with him just saying the same two words over and over.
Yeah.
Like,
well, she would just set him up to say that and it would make sense.
Right.
So that's she's telling herself what she wanted.
Yeah, that's all she wanted to hear from him his entire life. And he probably never got that.
Right.
So we got, Guatemala Meat Wallet is like, it's like Johnny Depp in Transcendence. Did you guys see Transcendence with Johnny Depp?
No, wait, what is that? And yeah. I'm sorry, what did you just say? Guatemalan Meat Wallet?
Yeah, it's the user on Twitch. I might have seen it, but I don't remember it. So I was hoping I could get you guys to talk about it. So never mind.
Oh, did a similar thing happen in that movie?
I don't know. I guess. Sorry, Guatemala Meat Wallet.
There's a show. Fuck, I'm blanking.
They
on the
upload
title.
his consciousness into a computer, apparently.
Oh, yes. I mean, there's a lot of, right, if we start to think about all the sci-fi movies that kind of do that.
There's a pretty fun show that came out just in the past couple of years, and I'm blanking on the title, but like they have better versions of digital heaven depending on how rich you are, and like you want to like get that real estate.
Oh, wait, wasn't that a Black Mirror episode?
I have not seen any Black Mirror, so probably.
This is probably not the same thing, but there was a Black Mirror episode where you, I guess you're not dead. It's like when you retire, you can now, it was actually one of like the nice ones. Most of them are dark and scary. And this was like an actual sweet episode where basically like you retire, but then you just hang out in your virtual conscious reality version where you just can be in whatever body you want and have whatever relationships you want. And it's like a love story. She meets this other woman. And I think like in this virtual version, she's like a young white woman and the other person's like a young Black woman, and they like sort of become friends and then lovers. But in reality, they're like two old people, kind of zapping in. It's not quite the same. So never mind.
Okay. So wait, the show that I was talking about, did you guys see Upload? It came out just a couple years ago.
I don't think so.
It's a Greg Daniels show.
On Amazon Prime?
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw the first season. I didn't watch the second though.
It has some very funny moments to my way of thinking. But the concept is like this girl like uploads her boyfriend to digital heaven, even though he wasn't going to die. He like, she basically murders him and uploads him so that he'll never break up with her.
The concept is horrific.
Yeah.
It's basically like, you know what? You're dead, but as long as you're rich, you're going to have a great afterlife. If you're not rich, well, you can get a job, maybe.
Right.
Fuck that. If I'm dead, I don't want to work.
Right. I mean, there's like some very high concept stuff in it. There's like a kid who died young and he's uploaded there, but like he doesn't get to grow up. So he goes into like the black market of this digital heaven, but his like black market aging parts turn him like quasi female, and that was an unintended thing.
Yeah, you just made me think of the original Star Trek movie.
The movie, the motion picture,
the motion picture, right, which was like 10 hours long, and
yeah.
nothing happened.
Yeah,
but there is like the whole premise was that they sent Voyager, you know, when the actual NASA sent Voyager out into space, like back in the 70s. So then, like in this version, they're getting these weird radio signals. They don't know what they're from. And it was Voyager that had somehow taken. So I don't want to bore. Okay, so at the beginning of the movie,
You're
like
not boring.
everyone's crowing up, and there's like a problem. There's this bald woman, right? Which I remember as a kid, I was like really taken by the fact there's this bald. I'd never seen a bald woman before, and she was like, she gets in the transporter, and there's a malfunction, and she gets caught in the transporter and dies like mid transport. She never makes it on, and it's like this horrible, dun dun dun, like, and then Kirk and the gang go way out into space, and they're like exploring whatever this weird mysterious thing is, and they see her there, and they're like, what? And what happened was that like Voyager, which they kept hearing the word V'ger, and they didn't know what V'ger meant, and it was Voyager, somehow took her consciousness and created a new clone of it. The story is so convoluted that as I tell it to you, it makes even less sense than it did in the actual movie. I'm just like, that is the stupidest thing. But it was basically that. It was like this artificial intelligence uploaded a human consciousness to sort of keep going, the crew going. And so this like not real version of a real person was like walking around. So
I just saw that movie for the first time since it was like in the theaters like 2 years ago. And I was like, A, I don't know what the fuck is going on. And B, this is fucking boring as hell. That's all I remember.
And that was just 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I haven't tried to watch it in a long, long time. I don't remember any of that. And I loved Star Trek. So like, when I finally saw that movie and could not make my brain focus on it. Like,
it was a bummer. I was so excited to watch it, and I was like, oh.
And it's got the guy from Seventh Heaven.
Yeah, the pedophile.
I just remember there's like a long tracking shot of the Enterprise that takes probably half an hour to go. And it's literally longer than the Spaceballs opening scene, which was making fun of that.
Right. The whole point of which is it's funny for this to go on forever and ever.
I was like, wait a minute. They outdid Mel Brooks. It's impressive.
Yeah, I think that if I remember correctly, like that movie is trying to capitalize on 2001, which was itself incredibly fucking boring.
Yeah.
So trying to replicate a boring movie,
you're gonna do great.
Yeah, way to go, guys.
Fantastic.
Is Kirstie Alley in that or the second one?
I think the second one.
Okay.
I think.
Is that Khan? She's a Romulan.
She's either a Romulan or a Klingon, maybe.
No, not a Klingon. She's a.
Is she a Vulcan?
Yes, she's a Vulcan.
Oh. Yeah, when was that? I guess that was the second one. See, the second one was, at least to my memory, was a lot of fun. I guess I haven't seen that in a while. Maybe it's not as good as I.
That was the one with the earworm, right?
Yeah, and Ricardo Montalban, which just makes the movie. Yeah. I think everybody has fond memories of that one.
Yeah, for sure.
It's amazing they let him do that after that first movie. So it's so bad. I watched that first movie with my daughter. I showed it to her. I was like, oh, you know what she's got to watch in her cultural like training of growing up is like Star Trek. And then I was like, why did I show her this?
Yeah, how much do you guys, or have you ever, like, I'm sure that there are like a million things you want to share with your kids, but then you're like, I need to vet this first, or not.
I didn't at all. Every time I was like, oh, you got to see this. I love this. And then as we would be watching it, I'd be like, ooh, They shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, so she loves music and dancing, and the Moving Image Museum was showing like a restored super giant print of an American in Paris. And I was like, oh, she will love this. And she did love it, but the like the it is so cringeworthy sexist. In the most, like, the guy just talks to the woman as if she is a dumb doll, a pretty doll, but a dumb. I forget. He says so many phrases like "not much going under the stream," but I mean, just like line after line of like, "You're just cute," and I'm really not interested in anything other than the fact that you're cute. And I mean, it was like one scene after another, and I just felt like the worst father on earth. I was like, why? What a horrible human being I am to like be imposing this point of view on my daughter. I mean, thankfully, it's like it's so clearly dated, and there's so many other things that counteract that message these days. It's like whatever. It's just so it's not a big deal. We're just like, but watching it, I was like, Jesus Christ, like what a horrible. I mean, the movie is amazing in many ways. It's beautiful in the choreography and blah blah blah.
And I'm sure you're like, it's has got to be so wholesome. It's so old. There's no way it could be anything but wholesome.
Right. I was like, yeah, exactly.
But I mean, then you get the opportunity to sort of have your cake and eat it too, because you can use it as a teaching moment and contextualize all the stuff that just needs like further conversation.
Right.
Oh, for sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, you're right. And that's why I actually do like showing like old movies like that, because they're like they're so from another era, that like it's cool to get a sense of, first of all, like the pacing's different. So I like that she's watching something that's like slower paced and just weirder and quirkier in ways that today we wouldn't do, and then like the sexist stuff or whatever the issue. Like we watched the Seven Faces of Dr. Lao. Do you remember this film?
No, I don't remember that at all.
Oh my God. Tony Randall plays this Chinese man. So Tony Randall plays 7 different characters, including a Chinese man, classic, like stereotypical, like the Chinaman who comes in. It's an old West town. It's like the old West. And this guy comes in like on his little like horse or whatever. And they're like, who's this guy? Obviously. And everybody's super racist. And actually, to the credit of the film, like it's pointing out the racism, but still Tony Randall is Chinese in this film, so he's all made up, and he has this like the mysterious Oriental circus that he like puts up, and when people go to this circus, there's like 7 different characters who are all Tony Randall, and in different makeup. He plays like Merlin, he plays like the god Pan with his like little like pound flute and whatever. I mean, it is a weird, trippy movie, which is why I wanted her to see it, because it's really, and I barely remembered it. So like I was like, I want to watch it too. And it is weird and crazy, and you're like, who made this? And it's actually George Powell made it.
Oh.
Who didn't make a lot of movies, but he made like The Time Machine, and so there is like value to it, as like it's really interesting. But yeah, I mean, obviously starting with like super racist portrayal of Tony Randall playing a person who is not white was but it was a teaching moment, actually. Like it was good. We were able to talk about it. So you're right, Josh.
I think it's so fascinating when you see something that is ahead of its time in certain ways, where it's like trying to point out whether it's racism or sexism or something else that's like embedded in the culture, but it's so embedded in the culture that they don't even realize how they are also being racist or sexist in the pursuit of trying to fight it. Right. And like, for all I know, this is a great movie that could only get made because Tony Randall is the star power that gets it made.
Right.
And so, I'm going to guess that this was the 60s.
Yeah, it was like early 60s, late 50s. I can't remember. Yeah.
Right. So like the idea of, I mean, I don't know if he's playing like, I don't know if he's playing those characters for laughs or like straight with integrity. Or like,
it was both. I mean, like the Chinese the Dr. Lau character was definitely not like set up to be ridiculed. Like he was this sort of wise, like the sort of wise, mysterious old man who appears. So like, no, he didn't really play them for laughs. Like you weren't laughing at the characters that he played. There was definitely comedy in the movie, but it wasn't like, oh, look at me, I'm like he plays Merlin as like this actually almost sad old like wizard who's kind of lost it, and like this is like where he ended up in this like traveling circus, because he is actually supposed to be the Merlin. And of course, like he's trying and the crowd is laughing at him, but there's this one little boy who believes in him. And so like there's this really touching moment at the end, even though like everybody's left and he's trying to like make this trick work and he can't because he can't remember the right spell. Like the boy's faith in him sort of redeems, you know. So it's like that kind of like, it's pretty sappy as things go because it's from that era. But like you said, given all of the context of the background of like the time, they were trying to like be poignant and like progressive and like ahead, you know what I mean? Like you're right, like they were trying as best as they could given their limitations. But I always think, you know what, we're going to be the same way in 50 years whenever we look at our stuff, you know.
Totally. Like absolutely.
Mm-hmm. I mean, come on, society is nowhere near perfect right now.
Right.
I feel like there is always going to be an ism that's taken advantage of, and people are just like, it's fine, whatever. It's such a small population of people, fuck them.
Right.
Let's joke about their fucking trials and tribulations, because why not? Like, I can't do it with Black people anymore. Please don't cut that and loop that.
I like that, like you right away knew where Josh's mind was going. Like
I've never once done that. I've never once done that.
In like a Max Headroom style. Just do it like Max Headroom.
There's a mega cut coming.
Get that Nazi. All right.
Yeah, that's what's gonna get our podcast to blow up overnight.
Cancel. You can't cancel us. We're hardline right wingers that love to talk about Nazis and their fluids. All right.
Would you have loved the sex scene in this episode more if they had had the budget to put in Berlin's "Take My Breath Away"?
For the record, I hate sex scenes in general, but yes, absolutely, yes.
That would have been good.
It's like, are we meant to like Vanna Smith or not like Vanna
That's
Smith?
a great question. I have no idea.
Well, what do you think? I mean, that connected to that question. What do you think they meant by adding these like close-ups of her, where she's like filling the frame entirely and looking at him sort of, I guess, lovingly? I don't really know what that was about, but
like full Vaseline on the lens.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell because it's like an upload on the internet, but I think that was shot with like a soft lens, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole show looks like Vaseline lens, but that looked especially Vaseline lens.
Right. They really had to clean that after that scene was done. Yeah, I don't know, but it's like, I guess, I don't know. I don't know how to answer your question. I was confused by those shots. They're so jarring, but then it would cut to him and he had a similar close-up kind of like sexy leading man sort of like smile back, and so I was like, oh, I guess we're supposed to feel something here, but it was just so
I did not feel anything.
And it's also like, are we supposed to care? Like, is there supposed to be like any sort of love triangle feeling for me as the viewer with Theora and their barely touched on will they or won't they?
Yeah. Is Theora jealous? I don't know. What the fuck is
she's
happening?
not jealous. She's a professional. Like,
right, but they also
when
were
she
like
digs into Carter's past, she's like, well, you should address this fact that you guys have a background. She's not trying to steer him away from Vanna Smith.
Right.
No.
But that is a good question though, right? What's like had this show had more seasons, like where were the writers going with this like relationship between them two?
I think they were trying they were trying so hard to make that happen, but not at all. Like every once in a while they'll give like Theora a line or him a line, Edison a line, and it's like, wait a minute, what are you actually saying? And then it's dropped.
Right.
Like nothing is ever made of any of it ever.
Right.
Yeah, we have very little information about any character other than Edison in this whole, like throughout the entire show, we know almost nothing about anyone.
Yeah, she has a brother, right? We know that.
Uh-huh.
Who has
We,
an American accent? Yeah.
we've never heard another peep out of him
No.
Right, right. Well,
and
he's
his
in
struggles to
rehab.
raise a family.
No. Fuck him.
Yeah.
Is he still raking?
Of course not. He's on the up and up and maitre d dishwasher guy.
Oh yeah. He's
Yeah.
back to the nightclub restaurant that every single person goes to simultaneously.
Maybe he got a promotion. Maybe he's the guy standing on tables and posing. Who knows?
I see spin-offs.
Yeah, it's just screensavers of guys posing on tables.
It would have been so fun for them to expand how they look at this world, right? Like every time we get a glimpse of what life is like in the fringe, I find that fascinating.
Yeah. It's great.
And then it's
a great
dropped
world.
and it's never touched on again.
I would love to explore this world more and never ever explore Edison's past love life ever again.
Yeah, it's true. That would have been a good move in the structuring of the season. Let's veer away from Edison.
I mean, even the whole take out the past relationship and current relationship in this episode, it could have been way more fun and way more interesting. But just it felt yucky and forced. I don't care.
Yeah, it's true. Like and then like contrast to that, the what's his name in the trailer truck in the big TV.
Reg.
Reg, right? Like he's a likable guy. He's the one that you want to hang out with and learn more about. Like he's totally cool. Like their whole the both of them are like such cool people, and you're like, oh yeah, all of these like people that like want to be his friend, like Edison's friends. Edison has cool friends. He just himself is not a very cool person. So.
He's famous. That's why they want to be friends with him.
Yeah.
I guess I don't even want to say that because I like Reg and Dom. I don't want them to want to be friends with him.
Right.
Or Rick. What happened to Rick?
The rickshaw driver, Rick.
Yeah. Who goes between a motorcycle rickshaw and a regular rickshaw, and they should just walk.
Right. Please carry us those 20 yards. Yeah, these are unanswered questions.
I want more parties. I want more club scenes with giant pigs in them.
Oh, and also like we've still never seen them go to the wine truck.
Right.
It's been mentioned, although instead of going to a wine truck,
They
just pre-made martinis got like handed out immediately in the newsroom or the whatever that office space that's like extremely dark is supposed to be.
Yeah, so a lot of these questions are probably answered by like knowing like boring TV industry facts, like their budget was slashed in half or something, right? That we just don't know. So it seems to be always the case. I am reading or rereading this short story by David Foster Wallace called and Onward, the End of Empire. I don't know. It's like part of a short story collection, but like in his crazy neurotic David Foster Wallace way, he like there's a guy at an airport who's taking a survey of people's biggest fear, and he's got a list of their biggest fears, and a lot of them are like nuclear war. This was written like late 80s as well, nuclear war or whatever, and some of them are funny. And then the last one is biggest fear that the people who made Max Headroom will be allowed to make another show. Was like, I was like, oh, how apropos.
Rude.
Wow.
Yeah. And I couldn't tell if that was him saying that or if he was making fun of people, like making fun of middle America, I didn't know.
Either way, shots fired.
Right.
It's true.
Air horn.
I want to see the spinoff that's just big time TV. And
I would watch the shit out of big time TV.
Same. Maybe Edison Carter and Max Headroom show up every once in a while, but far less than big time TV shows up in Max Headroom. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Could we just start that network of like, what if big time TV were real? Like, can we just start having a big time TV network?
Yes.
I mean, I think everyone can now. Like the democratization of streaming. Like anyone can stream anytime, anywhere.
Right.
The future, it's 20 minutes in the future now.
That's true.
There's a lot of noise in the future.
Yep. It's noisy as hell.
Yeah, I guess that's the part no one ever predicted, right? It was like, oh, it's just a glut of shit. So.
Oh yeah, crap, so anyone can do this? Fuck.
It's fascinating to me that there's a quick discussion in the boardroom in this episode about how they're losing their 5 to 11-year-old viewership.
Yeah.
And that's like a fucking real thing. Like kids watching other kids on YouTube is like a real, I mean, I get that like there's always been like children's programming and there always will be, but like
yeah, it's a very real thing. Yeah, Sesame deals with it all the time. Sesame Street's always literally, that is a big fear because like they're like competing with literally the dumbest shit that anyone, kids don't care, right?
No.
Right.
That you spend millions of dollars on this set with these puppets and whatever. They just want to be entertained. So like, yeah, I know. I thought that was like an actually like funny, poignant, satirical line there. I was like, oh yeah, that was a good bit in that script in that episode.
I would love to hear if you're able to talk on this. I don't know, like if you're allowed to or not, like what the discussions are where it's like, we need to have kids watching our show and like, how do we do that? Like where it's good for the kids, it's good for the parents.
Oh yeah, it's a constant, it's literally a constant, it's like an unanswered question that's constantly, because it's like on one hand, you have like an agenda, like the whole basis of this existence is to like help kids learn and do things that are good for kids. So like that's like your mission statement, right? And then the reality is like you live in a capitalist system and you're not competing. I mean, you are competing with pretty much everything. And like, when the show started, it was like a government grant. Like it was like, here's money, just do good things and don't worry about having to compete because you're not selling ad space. And that went away very quickly. And ever since then, it's always been walking that tightrope between like, how do we do the right thing and yet don't go under? And I mean, I think different people make decisions all the time that like fall on either side of that line. Like, I think as a company, they're like trying to do the right thing, but like, like they had an iPhone commercial a few years ago, for example. And I was like, I didn't personally care for that. I was kind of like, that's kind of BS. I don't agree with that move. But at
so
the
there
same
were like
time,
Muppets using iPhones.
It was literally like Cookie Monster doing an iPhone commercial, like a legit commercial.
Wow.
And it was cute and whatever. But I was like, the hell, like I was completely, I did not like, and I wasn't the only one, but like overall, I think the consensus within there was like, we need it makes us relevant, keeps us relevant with the culture, and that's important because that way people care about us. And B, like we're not getting fun, we need funding from somewhere, and I think for those two reasons it was like accepted. And so like it's at some point you're like, it's hard to argue when you're just like, well, if your choice is you go under, or not, like I don't know, it's one of those like deal with the devil type of things. I mean, I personally don't like any of that stuff. It drives me nuts. But then there are times when they're like saying no to money that's offered because it is like associated with, I don't know, some whatever horrible group or whatever. Like they do. So they are trying to steer that ship, but there's no like clear path. It's like, especially as like you said, like you're like, I mean, Sesame Street used to be an hour-long show. They used to film 150 episodes a year, 150 one-hour episodes a year, which is insane. What? Like the amount of, I'm like, who edited that stuff? Like, that's just crazy to me.
Well, things play out kind of long, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. Things would run, right? But like kids were like, you're like totally glued for an hour. You're like totally like now, of course, the kid gets bored like that and they just switch over to like Netflix or whatever and watch some like 2-minute whatever. So the show's format has shrunken. Like it's only like 24 minutes now. And even that, like, so there's a lot of just that has already changed the shape of the actual what it is you're watching. Like things are shorter, things are not they don't have those like long stories that go out. Like none of that exists anymore. So
Oh, that's a
just
bummer.
it is, because then you watch. I just saw this like bit in like from the '80s, and it's like from Sesame Street, and like a bunch of kids go visit Herbie Hancock, who's like on a Fairlight system doing crazy sampling, and they're like, say your name, and the kid says her name, and then he's like doing all these crazy, like sampling, and the kids are like glued, and it's like a 15-minute piece, and you're glued, like you, even as an adult, you're like, this is fucking awesome, and I wish they did stuff like that, but there's like no space. There's just no space in the show they just can't allow themselves to take such a creative risk as allowing a bunch of kids to just watch someone mess around on a keyboard. Like they're like, oh no, everything's gonna be tighter and faster. And so it's like, yeah, I don't know. There's no good answer other than like honestly, the answer is like government funding. If we like put less money in bombs and Raytheon and more money to just let shows do that, then they wouldn't have to worry about like competing, and they could just do something that's cool. But we don't have that. It's not like France or other countries where they actually like fund the arts. Yeah.
Well, but is funding the arts, and I'm not, of course, arguing against funding for the arts, but is funding for the arts in this case going to like increase the audience, like make it better? Would you be able to make a better, more interesting show that a bigger audience is going to be more interested in?
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
I think that when the government is funding the arts, it doesn't necessarily matter, because whether your audience grows or might stagnate at some point, you still have money coming in and you can do what is legitimate in your eyes. So you can get better, you can make better stuff, but not worry about if the numbers are good. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, I think that's important, but then if part of your mission is like adding value to children's lives, you can't like put yourself in like the ivory tower situation of like, okay, we're going to make something good whether kids watch it or not. Like we have to, you know what I mean? Like you gotta draw them in somehow, and you've got to give them value once they show up.
Yeah, it's a chicken or egg thing, because like it's sort of like if kids are also, I mean, kids don't know. It's like we're talking about, like we thought Max Headroom was really cool, right? Like kids don't know. They really just don't know. They're like an open
kids are
sponge.
Stupid idiots. Yeah.
I mean, they're not. The thing is, they're not dumb. They just don't have the critical faculties to make smart decisions, right? They are super smart, but they just don't know how to discern from like good and bad. They'll just swallow whatever you give them.
Right. A baby has none of the filters that decides this is interesting and this is not interesting. A baby, the whole world is super fucking interesting. Right. And like you develop filters as you age.
Right. So it's like it or not, you are actually giving them those filters by what you expose them to, And so like, I would think that like, if we like, so if you're constantly thinking like, well, what is like the test marketing saying? And like, what are the trends and so on, then you're just like a feedback loop. You're almost like
you're chasing a trend that's already old by the time you know about it.
Right. It's going to be inauthentic. It's not going to be right.
Right. And so like, I would say like, if you had like government funding that just gave you the freedom to experiment, like you will do something really cool, and eventually that will catch on because it is inherently interesting and cool. It may not happen right away, and that's part of the problem is like people want to see results. Like I need to see results tomorrow, or the funding goes away, right? But if you gave it that space, I mean, Jim Henson, none of them knew what the hell they were doing when they started. They were literally just making shit up. They didn't have any research to back up that this was good or bad. They just did it, and they just went with their gut. And so like, we don't have that space anymore. That's the hardest part, is like, there's no room to just go with your gut, and like, you have to prove everything you're doing ahead of time is going to have the, like, you can't just be like, I think this is going to work. It's like, no, the research shows that kids are looking at this and therefore blah, blah, blah. So you just keep doing the same thing that everyone's been doing already. I don't know how you create interesting stuff that way. That's like that's my own person. This is not reflective views of anyone. Yeah. It's just my own personal opinion.
I've seen a bunch of like early Henson stuff where he's just like an experimental filmmaker. And even as a person who like is steeped in that stuff and studied that stuff, like it's not that interesting a lot of the time. And giving a person who's making not that great stuff like the opportunity to make more stuff, and eventually it leads to something that really works. I mean, most people don't get that opportunity. Like, why him and not someone else is part of my question. Like,
But are you looking at it through like current eyes? Was it maybe better? I'm asking.
That's a fair question. I mean, I think that he, if I remember correctly, and Memo, you might actually be really the expert to talk to. I think that he was like an experimental filmmaker and he worked in advertising, and he sort of bounced between those two.
Yeah, he loved doing weird experimental stuff. He also like he had created like his first Muppet like a long time ago, and he was like on local UHF TV, and he kind of grew from there. And by the time he started doing stuff for Sesame Street, like he had built a reputation of being this cool, like eccentric guy who did interesting things. But he was doing weird stuff that sometimes was brilliant and sometimes, like you said, like fell flat. But it was like, but he was trying stuff, you know. He made this like TV movie called The Cube that's like an hour long, and the whole thing is a guy sitting in a white room and he can't leave the white room, and people this was like on TV, which is crazy that this was on TV, but like he's just in a white room, and then people keep entering the room through like random windows and doors and panels that you didn't know were there, but then they leave, and like the guy can't leave, like, and they just come in and say and have these weird, it's almost like a play, like a sort of like absurdist play, like a Beckett type of play, but it's like the fact that it's on TV, you're just like, who paid for this? Like, this is crazy. And the fact that they let him, and it's sometimes it's really cool and sometimes it's a little bit boring, like, you know, like the situations aren't all like A pluses, but like just letting that happen on TV, and that like Americans are watching this on TV, like, here, we're just going to throw you some interesting stuff to think about, right? It's like, we don't, like, that's just mind-blowing in itself. So like, yeah, I think he had proven himself in the sense of like, here was a truly creative guy, but he really didn't, he really was like experimenting half the time, you know, and he just got better at his craft. But like, I mean, why him sounds over someone else was probably just like coincidence, circumstance. It was like, oh, he just happened to be at this thing and I just happened to bump into him and pitch him this idea. I don't think it was like a market research team about it. It was just like, oh, I was here in New York in the 60s and so was this person. And, you know,
I mean, I have to imagine that this is the kind of, you know, the same sort of low budget mindset of like, okay, if we just have actors on a set, we can shoot it so fucking cheaply. Like, if we can just bring this thing in at an incredibly low budget, we get the deal, right? Like,
yeah,
I'm just guessing here that it was based on strictly dollars, and they're like, oh, fuck it, it's like worth it to just gamble that little money and see if it hits. And then you've got a track record. You're like, oh, I just had like a movie on TV. Like, don't you know? Like, I'm the cause celeb.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I don't think they had a huge budget, and they did have, like, from the research side, Joan Gans Cooney, who's like the founder, the educational side founder of Sesame Street. Like, you know, she had done research, but she was still going on a hunch that was like, maybe the way to reach poor, and specifically it was like poor Black or urban, quote unquote, kids, right? Like, who are like falling behind compared to like the suburban white kids. Like, maybe the best way to do it is to emulate TV, which is what they're used to watching. So we're going to like copy and parody like commercials and the way TV works, but make it what we're selling are like ABCs and 1, 2, 3s and whatever, which back then was like this mind blowing, you know, because kid stuff wasn't like that. And so, and in sort of like that sort of like, let's just try this. There really was like, we don't really know this is going to work, but like, I have a hunch that kids are going to like this stuff. And I'm just going to call in like whatever creative people I happen to have met in my journey who happened to be Jim Henson, and like, hey, let's just do. So there was a lot of like, we have like a really good idea that we believe in, even though it hasn't been proven. and then let's just like come up with stuff, you know. And today it's like the opposite. It's like we have to prove the idea first. We got to do all this research. We got to. So like, how's like a creative person who's just fucking around gonna have a chance to like stumble on the next cool thing? Like, there's just no space for it. And I don't just mean that show. I just mean everything.
And then like the Muppet Show, which I fucking loved so much as a little kid, wasn't teaching us anything. But it was like, I mean, you know, it was the Larry Sanders Show. It was the 30 Rock, the behind the scenes of a variety show, but with Muppets. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's I know. I also appreciate the lack of educational value, which in itself is educational and valuable, you know? Like, where's like just doing things for being because they're creative and interesting? Like, where's like that like value? That's true. Which I guess Max Headroom kind of was at. Like, that's what appealed to us, is like, it was like, oh, this is totally different and weird.
It was a breath of fresh air. I mean, there was nothing else like it. Even though it seems to have moved more and more towards what was already there.
Yeah. They're trying to make it like everything else right now. And I hope this is just a singular thing. I hope it goes back to what it was.
I mean, you got 4 episodes left to find out, right?
I know.
Yeah.
Or maybe, I think there might be 6 episodes. There were 6 episodes in the first season. I think there's 8 in the second, plus a Christmas special.
Can't wait for that. Let me check.
Yeah.
It's 6 more episodes.
Okay.
There's 8 episodes in the second season.
All right. Well, there you go. There's still time. There's still time for a comeback.
Fingers crossed.
A big comeback. We're rooting for you, Max Headroom.
You can do it.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this episode. This has been On Fire Tonight with Josh and Tressa. Special